We can't guess about what the treatment for breast cancer is, or for any cancer for that matter. Every major advance from breast cancer has come from research and has come from clinical trials. Involvement of a clinical trial is a very personal experience and also very dependent on the clinical trial options available. I think it's absolutely necessary for anyone who's diagnosed with breast cancer to speak to their doctor about what are the potential clinical trials that I might be eligible for, and to dispel a very common myth, an understandable myth, which is that many people are afraid that they're going to be experimented on. I can tell you as someone that runs clinical trials that there are so many rules and regulations in place to make sure that patients are safe. And with that in mind, I think it's important that if patients are interested in them, that they talk to their doctor about potentially available clinical trials and what are the potential benefits and what are the potential harms. The way that we move forward is through research. The way that we move forward is by the generous participation of patients in clinical trials.
Mammograms are your best defense against breast cancer, but if you've never had one before, the process can seem intimidating. That's why today we are breaking down what to expect during your first mammogram from start to finish.
That is so important. Here to help us is medical oncologist at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. It's Dr. Elizabeth Comen. Good to see you, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us, who should be screened and why are mammograms so important?
So we know that mammograms are essential for detecting cancers early. Mammograms save lives. For the average risk woman, we want to start screening at age 40. Now, some women may need to start screening earlier than that based on individual risk factors, like a strong family history.
So you're going to walk us through each of the steps of how this goes, but what should women do before the first appointment for their mammogram?
Well, the first thing is it's really understandable to be nervous before your first mammogram. Lots of women are. You can call a friend, let a family member know about the anxiety, and maybe bring them along with you. But a couple of things to think about. One is your breasts may be tender around your period, so getting your mammogram perhaps after your period is a good way to think about it. Another thing is not to wear deodorant and lotions. Lots of people don't know that. The deodorant and lotions can actually affect the image itself. The other thing is you're going to be asked to change from the waist up. So one thing to consider is perhaps wearing pants or a skirt so that you're only changing from the waist up. And the other really important thing is consider bringing a friend. That support can be so important.
So about 250,000 women are diagnosed every year with breast cancer. That's 1 in 8 women, or 1 woman every 2 minutes is diagnosed with breast cancer. So one of the questions that I get asked all the time are, what are some of the risk factors for breast cancer? And one of the most common assumptions is that you have to have a family history to have breast cancer. And while that's very important to know, and it's exceptionally important to know your family history, the number one risk factor is being a woman and getting older. The majority of patients that I see, their risk factor is simply that they're a woman, and women over the age of 50, 55 are at an increased risk for breast cancer. But what are some of the other things, and what are some of the more modifiable risk factors? So having a child is protective, particularly before the age of 30, although I know that for many professional women, including myself, that's very challenging. Breastfeeding can be protective in terms of decreasing a woman's risk for breast cancer. Certainly maintaining a healthy weight. One of the things we know for cancer overall, and this is kind of shocking when you look at the demographics, particularly in the United States, but obesity is overtaking tobacco as the number one risk factor for all cancers. And why is it also a risk factor for breast cancer? Because we believe that being in a state where you're overweight even produces a state of chronic inflammation, and that chronic inflammation can release certain chemicals that can increase a woman's risk for breast cancer.
Joining us now with more is Dr. Elizabeth Comen. She's an oncologist at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. Thank you so much for being with us, and you're one of those people doing the very cool work. We've heard about President Biden's big cancer initiative. How does that affect people like you who are there on the front line?
Well, it's an extraordinary initiative with 2 critical goals. first to decrease the number of cancer deaths by 50% over the next 25 years, and just as importantly, to improve the lives and experiences of those patients and loved ones suffering from cancer. And it's not just about doctors on the front lines, but most importantly, patients. I think we can all agree that we all want to see the end of suffering as we know from cancer today.
And you're wearing pink today.
Yes.
October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. There are some advancements in breast cancer treatments. Tell us about those.
Absolutely. It's been such an exciting year for breast cancer treatment. So one of the most challenging types of cancer to treat is metastatic breast cancer, which means breast cancer cells that have spread from the breast to another part of the body, like the liver or the bone. And a new treatment, an FDA-approved treatment called Enhertu or TDXD, is being used to improve the survival of patients with a new classification of metastatic breast cancer called HER2 low metastatic breast cancer. So for anybody watching, if they or their loved one has metastatic breast cancer, it's critical that they ask their doctor, do I have HER2 low breast cancer, and might this be an appropriate treatment for me?